So in this video, I want to go over one, what jQuery is, and two, how it works. So this is intended for people who might have never heard of jQuery before, and they're just getting started with it, and they want to know what the deal with it is. And it's also for people who may have spent some time using it, but don't really know how it works. And I used to be a good example of that kind of person. So when I was first learning, I would be able to write code like this, where I've got a header and a button, and I would say when this button is clicked, toggle the H1 with an animation of slow. So I would be able to do things like this, but I didn't know how it worked, and that's not a healthy way to be coding, to just be trusting that things are magic and that they just work. It's good to understand how they work. And the main thing that confused me was this $sign thing here. Like, I've written JavaScript before, so I thought like I knew JavaScript and ready to learn jQuery, but I never saw $sign when I wrote JavaScript. And I only saw $signs when I wrote jQuery, so I thought, I don't know, there was something just weird and magical about jQuery that just, you use a $sign and you can do all these cool things. But I'm going to explain to you what this $sign is, and how it works. So this $sign thing is literally just a JavaScript variable that is a function. So that's all there is to it. Oops, yeah, it's just a function, and this function takes one argument, which is a string, and this string is used to select a DOM element. So let me show you what I mean by that. So, and first of all, yeah, I can just show you in this web page, jQuery is loaded, and you can see it's just a function. Okay, so the DOM, if you don't know what the DOM is, you can just think of it as HTML. Each one of these things, these HTML elements, is or corresponds to really a DOM node. So each one of these things is a DOM node, and it's a tree structure where you've got a node that has children, and this node has a parent, stuff like that. It forms a tree, like a family tree. So jQuery can select these DOM elements, and I will show you that. So let's say I want to select this DOM element with an ID of logo events. I can just do this. So use my jQuery function, pass in my one argument, which is a string, and I want to select logo events, and it returned this DOM node. So that's the first thing to understand about jQuery, is that it's a function, it takes one argument, which is a string, and it returns a DOM node, as you can see right here. And okay, you might be thinking, that's sort of cool, but why would I want to do that? And the answer to that is that really you can think of this as a combination between like a DOM node and object. It's really an object, the JavaScript object, and it has properties, like all objects, they have properties. And you can use these properties to manipulate the object and do cool things with them. So that's why you'd want to use jQuery, so you can select an object and then do cool things to it. So back to this original example, yeah, I selected the object and I did a cool thing to it. I made it disappear and reappear. Okay, so one caveat to that is that jQuery doesn't, it's not just a function. Well, Okay, so this $ thing has other properties, like, I don't know, let's say foo. It doesn't have foo, but you can imagine that it does. So now when I go like this, it has foo. And if you don't know that much about JavaScript, this might be confusing to you, because like how can a function have properties? And the deal with that is that functions aren't actually JavaScript data types. There's only these data types, and function isn't there. So a function is actually just an object, and you can assign properties to an object. Yeah, that's not a huge deal with this video, but the point is that I told you that jQuery is a function, but it also has properties. And you can see these properties, they're just utility methods. So it lets you, trim white space, iterate over an array, stuff like that, just convenient little things. But that's not really the core of what jQuery is, so let's forget about that. I just wanted to address that caveat. Okay, so now I want to go over why would you want to use jQuery? Like, what can it do? And these are the core things that it can do. You select the DOM element, I showed you that. You do stuff to it. So yeah, 1 and 2, this is really the core of why you use jQuery. And then you can also send Ajax requests with jQuery, and you can set up event handlers with jQuery too, and I'll show you all of that stuff. Actually, I want to take back what I said about 1 and 2. Like, these are all core reasons to use jQuery. Okay, so let's go through each of them. Selecting DOM elements. It's literally, you do it just like you do it in CSS. So, assuming you know CSS, you use these selectors, the hash, the dot for classes, by attribute. It's the same as CSS. So that's really should be exciting to you. If you don't know jQuery and you do know CSS, you already know how to select DOM elements. So that's pretty cool. And the only other thing to say about selecting DOM elements is that once you select an element, you can traverse this this DOM structure, this tree structure. So if you selected subchild, you can then do .parent, and it would give you this DOM node, this parent of the subchild. So a lot of times when you're coding, you want to traverse the tree, go up to the parent, the children, and stuff like that. So that's another thing that falls under the category of selecting DOM nodes. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. We know how to do that. The next thing is, what do you do to the DOM nodes once you've selected them? And basically, you can think of it as if you're editing the HTML. So an HTML element has different parts to it. It's got these properties, like I can say foo equals bar, like these are the properties of this HTML element, and it's got text, which in this case is hi. And if this were like an input element, it could have like, it wouldn't have text, it would be a value, so don't worry about that. So you've got the attributes slash properties, you've got the text slash value, and then they also have CSS, like it had this, I don't know, maybe the color is red, let's say. So jQuery lets you manipulate these things. And let's look at some examples of that. Let's see. Manipulating elements. Okay, so you can use this .html to set the HTML, .text, .attribute, width, the height, position, the value. You can change all of these things using jQuery. And these are sort of low-level things. Like jQuery gives you I don't know, higher level things you can do. So I showed you this toggle thing with the argument of slow. It made it disappear, but it animated it. And you don't have an actual toggle isn't part of this HTML I showed you, but it's a wrapper for changing the CSS and the other properties of the element. Okay, so yeah, those are the things you can do to the DOM node that was selected. And that's a big chunk of what jQuery is. So let's move on to Ajax. Hopefully you know what Ajax is. If you don't, this isn't really the time to be going over it. But if you do know what Ajax is, you'll understand that you can use jQuery to send Ajax requests. And it's really simple. You just do something like this. You do jQuery dot the type of Ajax request you want to do, the URL you want to send it to, and then a callback of what you want to do when the request comes back. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It makes it really easy to do this. Okay, let's move on to events. You can also set up event listeners with jQuery, and jQuery makes it easy to do this. So what this is basically saying is when the click event happens on this element, I want to do this. And that's all there is to that. There's a bunch of events you can listen for. They're listed here. You got the blur, change, click, double click. Basically, any event that can happen, you can listen for that event and then say, I want to do this when that event happens. And yeah, that's basically what jQuery is. I didn't go into really how to use it, but that's not what this video is about. It's about just giving you an idea of what it is and what you can do with it. And I just want to end by talking about the advantages to jQuery, because everything I've described, you can do it with JavaScript. So why would you want to use jQuery? And the answer to that is that it's often easier to use jQuery than to use JavaScript. It's just, I don't know, it's simpler. And two, that jQuery is compatible with like all these different browsers. So let me show you what I mean by this. If you want to send an Ajax request with, in vanilla JavaScript is what they call it, you would have to do something like this, and this is just ugly. And with jQuery, it's much, much cleaner. So you can see that jQuery is easier, and this works with all browsers. So you can just trust that whatever you do with jQuery, it's going to work with all browsers. Whereas with JavaScript, without this if-else thing right here, it would only work on these browsers. So if you want to do an Ajax request in JavaScript that will work on these two browsers, i.e. 6 and 5, you have to manually write this code. But with jQuery, that is always handled for you. So you don't even have to think about that sort of stuff. So, okay, hopefully you understand what jQuery is, how to use it, what the advantages are, and you can move on and go through some tutorials to develop the skill of using jQuery.